All right, so I got some good news here on the labor movement for you guys because 8,000 Kroger workers from the state of Colorado have decided to go on strike to demand better pay and better benefits. So I want to read to you from this good little breakdown we got here from Common Dreams' Julia Conley, and basically taking this with the context that we are going to get into here in a second on this new report that just came out, putting it into full perspective how much average Kroger employees have been getting absolutely shafted throughout this pandemic and even before. So first, let's just set the stage a little bit. More than 8,000 Kroger grocery workers are on strike in Colorado, and the strike began a day after a report showed that 14% of Kroger workers have experienced homelessness in the past year, okay? 14%, and this is one of the most profitable and largest companies within the United States and one of the largest employers as well. But she says, on the heels of a new report showing significant financial insecurity, including homelessness amongst workers at Kroger grocery stores, more than 8,000 of the chain's employees in Colorado went on strike Wednesday to demand fair wages and better healthcare benefits. And amid a recent wave of successful strikes at companies including the John Deere and the Kellogg strikes, both of which I covered on this channel if you want to go and watch those videos, the work stoppage is taking place at nearly 80 King Scooper grocery stores, which are owned by the Kroger company across the Denver metropolitan area. And according to the Colorado Sun, 10 additional stores in Colorado Springs could also go on strike in the coming weeks, and I absolutely hope that they do join in this fight. But they say that the workers union United Food and Commercial Workers Local 7 rejected the company's recent best and final offer on Tuesday, saying that the $84 billion company did not offer enough for employees to afford basic necessities. And we got a quote here saying, King Scoopers is enjoying record profits while leaving its workers to struggle with low wages. The union president Kim Cordova said in a statement, grocery workers ensure that our communities have access to food, but they cannot even afford to feed their own families. This is grossly unfair. And she's obviously right, to say the least. But the union is demanding better health benefits and working conditions, particularly considering that COVID-19 cases are rising and employees have had to continue working on the front lines of the pandemic for nearly 2 years. And this also, if you guys remember, all the way back like towards the beginning of the pandemic, Kroger came out and they temporarily gave some of their workers hazard pay, which was like very measly crumbs at the time, even relative to what they were being asked to do, to go risk their lives, to pack people's groceries into bags and stock the shelves, etc. So in and of itself, it's kind of crazy that they have to risk their lives to do that, let alone, risking their lives for absolute dog shit wages. But they gave them temporary hazard pay for like 2 months and then immediately took it away as we were still in the middle of a raging pandemic. So Kroger obviously does not give a single shit about their employees. And we know this because of the data, again, that we just got from this recent report. So I'm going to go ahead and link this in its entirety down below so you can read it for yourself. But I just wanted to bring to you guys some of the major data points that stood out to me in this report, because it gives us a perspective in terms of how well Kroger is doing as a company, and then how absolutely terribly their workers are doing as they are seeing record profits and their CEO's salary continues to skyrocket. So again, this is just an overall lesson in how the capitalist system functions. The profits that they are seeing are a direct result of the actual labor that their workers have been putting in and risking their lives to create that value, and they have been seeing basically none of the return on that value that they are producing for the corporation. So here we just got this first bit of data, Kroger adjusted operating profits. So you can see from 2019 to 2020 and then to 2021, basically the entire period of the pandemic, their profits have actually gone up. Okay, so as much as we're seeing like, these massive inflation numbers within the grocery stores, and they're talking about how much they're struggling and there's this labor shortage, etc. Okay, they're seeing record profits. They're doing better right now during the pandemic than they were before the pandemic. Okay, so don't believe any of those lies. And obviously this would indicate that their workers should be doing better, or should be at least getting minimally rewarded for the fact that they are doing this much better in the middle of a pandemic. But of course they're not. And we have another data point here, Kroger CEO compensation adjusted to $2021. And you see here again, it's like they're using the excuse of this entire pandemic to just under the veil of all of these different talking points that we have to deal with and push back, again, whether it's inflation or the labor shortage and everything else, trying to pin the blame on like stimulus to average workers and on the workers themselves for being lazy or whatever the fuck. Meanwhile, they're using this as a guise to go and shovel more money to their investors, shovel more money to their CEOs, and shovel more money to the shareholders. So again, just completely ridiculous. His the CEO's pay has skyrocketed over the course of the pandemic dramatically. Okay, and so on top of that, we just saw again that a couple years ago they canceled the hazard pay after like only a couple months. And just to put that into perspective, how much they spent on that versus stock buybacks purely to drive up the value of their own stock, stocks. We got here another graph, Kroger expenditures for hazard pay versus the stock buybacks in 2020. So they spent $342 million on bare minimum crumbs of hazard pay for their employees, who again were risking their fucking lives to go stock the shelves for damn near minimum wage salaries. And they spent $342 million on hazard pay, and they spent $1.3 million, okay, $1 million more than that on stock buybacks, just to inflate the value of their stock in a public setting to try to deliver out to their shareholders. So again, you see the priorities. They very clearly do not care about their workers if they're spending multiple times more than that just to pump up their goddamn stock prices. But now to get into the perspective, okay, we've laid the groundwork. We understand exactly how well Kroger as a corporation, as well as their executives and CEOs, have been doing over the course of the pandemic. Well, now let's check in with the actual workers who are providing the value with their labor that gives those CEOs the millions of dollars that they stuff into their own pockets. Well, we just have a figure here, food security level of Kroger workers. So if you break this down into three different slots here, high or marginal food security, low food security, or very low food security, you see here, if you add up the low and the very low food security, it's like 78%, okay? 78%, more than 3/4 of Kroger employees don't have food security. They are working in a fucking grocery store and they can't afford groceries, okay? 78% of them. That is just absolutely wild state of affairs that we have going on here. But again, you know, this ties into the disconnect that we see under a capitalist mode of production between what, you know, a laborer, what a worker is actually doing in their day-to-day lives and what they are working with. In this case, you know, stocking the shelves and making sure people's groceries are bagged as they're leaving the store, etc. They are working directly in this industry, and yet they're not able to access the products that they themselves are helping to produce in the first place. So again, that's just inherent to the nature of a capitalist system. But they continue here breaking it down by age range, and this is just, again, absolutely wild, not just for, you know, a lack of food security, but also housing security. We saw that 14% of Kroger employees are homeless, but even just insecure on rent and groceries, okay? Lack of money to pay for rent and groceries by the age of workers. So let's just take, for example, my age range here, which happens to be the highest one of people between the ages of 21 to 29. So if you're somebody who's working at Kroger, just on your base salary pay that they are giving you, basically, okay, you see for groceries, 49% of people between the ages of 21 and 29 cannot reliably afford groceries. Again, they're working in a fucking grocery store, okay? And half of them cannot afford to keep up with the basic life necessities of accessing food. It's just completely ridiculous and perverse. But also, not just groceries, also on rent, okay? And it's even higher with that. With the same age bracket here that we're talking about, 21 to 29, it's 53% are not able to reliably keep up with their rent. So again, housing insecurity, food insecurity, etc. It's just all part of this ridiculous exploitation that exists under the capitalist mode of production. But I got a final one here for you guys just to sum it up, okay? Do you earn enough money to pay for basic expenses every month, okay? Just the basic expenses, nothing extravagant, nothing crazy, not going out and buying a new PS5 or whatever the fuck capitalists think people are spending their money on all the time, but keeping up with the basic necessities, okay? 63% of Kroger employees reported that they cannot keep up with the basic necessities. So again, this is a billion-dollar profitable company that is reporting record profits. Their CEO's salary is skyrocketing into the goddamn atmosphere. And meanwhile, they can't even, their own workforce, a majority of them cannot even keep up with the basic necessities. So again, you see the disconnect here between who's providing the actual labor and the value for these companies, the workers, and who is stealing that labor in the form of surplus value or otherwise what is known as profits under the capitalist system, okay? These motherfuckers are thieves. They are stealing the value that people like this are providing for them and then turning around and treating them like shit. And they had other statistics that were part of this that were just absolutely mind-blowing. They said that, like, you know, the vast majority of Kroger employees, when you adjust for inflation, their wages over the last couple of decades have actually gone down, okay? So they're not even keeping up with inflation. And meanwhile, again, they're reporting record profits. So just an absolutely wild disconnect here. But again, on the 14% number, just to give you a perspective in terms of the totality of that figure, from Jonah Furman, who does absolutely great labor reporting, he says, assuming that this 14% holds across the whole Kroger workforce, that's around 65,000 people working at the fourth largest private employer in the US, ranked 17th on the Fortune 500 list, who have been homeless while keeping this country's grocery stores running in a pandemic. 65,000 Kroger employees for a Fortune 500 company who have been homeless during the pandemic, keeping our stocks, keeping our shelves stocked during a pandemic, okay? Literally risking their lives to make sure that we have access to reliable food while they themselves don't even have it for them and their families. So again, this just is a lesson in the overall perverse nature of the capitalist system and how completely unsustainable it is in actually making sure that people are able to keep up with the basic life necessities, food, shelter, etc., healthcare, etc. And you see the disconnect here, okay? It's completely unsustainable. And so I hope that these workers who are going out on strike and using the very limited power that they do have under this capitalist system, that they get every single goddamn thing that they are asking for and do not relent on the fight until they do, okay? Under a capitalist system, basically, unions are the only way right now that we have, or at least the best way that we have, to have some sort of a democratic representation within a workforce. And so, in your own workforce, try to organize, try to get some sort of a union going if you can, because that's really the best that we can do. And forming some sort of a larger labor movement is the best shot that we have forward, because believe it or not, none of these corrupt politicians within Washington, D.C., whether the establishments of the Democratic or the Republican Party, they are not coming to save us.